Stop the winning run 90 feet away. Finnegan's 2-0 to Turner. In the dirt, Ruiz smothers it, runner breaks for the plate. The throw to Finnegan's behind him, and the game's over. On the wild pitch, Stott scores the winning run. 7-6 Phillies. On a wild pitch that got just maybe 15 feet away, Stott came barreling down the line. Ruiz's throw is behind Finnegan. And a brutal way to walk it off.
Yeah, brutal way. Dave Jagler on the call last night for Nats Radio on 106.7 The Fan, our sister station. What was even worse was the play before. More on that coming up in a moment. Good day, everybody. Rough loss for the Nats last night. But could there be another big loss coming for the city? How premature was the RFK return of the football team celebration on Monday? Apparently, they don't have the votes as of now. 7 city council votes needed to pass what the mayor negotiated, and they don't have them yet. Barry's Verluga will join us at 12 noon to get into the details of what happens next and why the current state of the deal is a bad one for the city. Chris Miles from NBA TV will join us at 11. We had another night of wild NBA finishes, including a finish that Giannis Antetokounmpo was involved in post-game with the father of an opposing player. Parents never come out onto the floor. Fred Smoot will join us on the show today with his recap of the Skins draft. Real quickly on the Nats game, because I happened to have been watching it last night. What a rally in the ninth. Lowe with the 3-run shot after Wood had a double and brought in a run. The Nats had 4 in the top of the ninth. They went into that inning down 5-2. They left it up 6-5. Kyle Finnegan came in. It was not a pleasant ninth inning because it started with a single, then a walk. Still had an opportunity, though, with 1 out and Rojas up. And after a long at bat and a relatively short fly ball to right field, an excellent throw, I thought, from Dylan Cruz. Maybe some of you Nats fans would say that it was a bit off to K-Bear Ruiz, but I thought Ruiz should have pulled that throw in and tagged out the runner, which was Baum, and they didn't. And that tied the game, and the next batter was wild pitch, game over. The Nats have been competitive, though, man. They've really been competitive, and, man, they are a completely different offensive baseball team than they were last year. C.J. Abrams last night, 4 for 5. James Wood, another hit and another RBI, and then the big bomb by Lowe in the ninth, 3-run shot that gave the Nats their lead. Another one with Philadelphia tonight. I want to start the show, or at least continue the opening segment of this show with this from Edward, because we've not had a chance to talk about this. I did talk about this yesterday on my podcast with Tommy, and there was a lot of response to it, and we can talk about it right now because just too much of our own draft to be concerned with than the rest of it. But it comes from Edward. Edward writes, Kevin, the NFL draft is all you said yesterday it is, especially when it comes to the unpredictability and the impossible to predict part of it. But it's a lot more than that. It's a chance for the NFL to make a statement on players and families they don't like. Shadur Sanders and family should sue the league for what happened over the weekend. It was disgusting. Thank you, Edward. Appreciate that. You can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Sheehan DC. Tweet me. You can also go to my website, thekevinsheehanshow.com, which is my podcast website, and email me if you want. Yeah, so we haven't gotten to the Shadur Sanders thing. It was pretty wild, over the weekend. He was, going into the draft, a couple of months ago, considered to be a lock to be a first-round pick. And then as we approached the draft, it became pretty apparent that the league's evaluation of Shadur Sanders was not necessarily the same evaluation outside analysts and outside mock drafters were giving Shadur Sanders, because we went from Is he potentially a top 3 pick with either Cleveland or the Giants picking at 2-3 after Cam Ward? And look, Cam Ward wasn't always the default number 1. There was a time during this season where Shadur Sanders was considered to be a possibility to go number 1 overall. And we're not talking about like the year before. The year before, Shadur Sanders was absolutely a consensus pick to be the number 1 quarterback anyway, taken in the draft. Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter were always supposed to go really high in the draft, even if you look back 6 months or a year ago. This was not necessarily a Sam Howell situation where, remember, Sam Howell, the year before he came out, was predicted to be a very high draft pick, a very high first rounder. Some even had him number 1 overall, and he ended up going in the 5th round, if you recall. This was, Shadur Sanders kind of falling from the perch of a potential number 1 to then it became clear that Cam Ward would be the number 1 pick in the draft, which, by the way, I think made a lot of sense in terms of the first quarterback taken in the draft. And then, as we got into the final weeks before the draft, you started to hear, well, the Giants and the Browns are not going to take Shadur Sanders because Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are, kind of generational prospects, or however, you want to describe them. Very, very strong draft prospects and just better, surefire things than Shadur Sanders. And then it, all got focused on, oh, wow, New Orleans is going to benefit from this. They picked 9. They need a quarterback. Derek Carr is hurt. And by the way, he is hurt, and he confirmed that the other day. It'll be interesting to see what New Orleans does. They took Tyler Shook in the draft. I don't know if he'll be the starter, or perhaps it's Spencer Rattler. I don't know. New Orleans is in a heap of trouble. Cap issues, depth issues. They've got some good players, but Kellen Moore is going to struggle there, you would think, for a while. But anyway, then it was, well, New Orleans is like, nah, they don't want Shadur Sanders. So then it became Pittsburgh at 21. Pittsburgh doesn't have a quarterback. Although I was reading something yesterday after the show. They like Mason Rudolph. And when I say they, the players apparently really like Mason Rudolph as their quarterback. Mason Rudolph has played in a bunch of games for the Steelers, in recent years. He was actually last year not in Pittsburgh. He was in Tennessee, not in Pittsburgh. But apparently they like Mason Rudolph a lot. 28. I went back to see when Mason Rudolph was picked and what draft, because quarterbacks, man, you don't know. Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield. We've had so many examples of quarterbacks being completely counted out. Now, Mason Rudolph was not the prospect that Baker Mayfield was, who went number 1 overall. Mason Rudolph went in the 3rd round of the 2018 draft to the Steelers. He is 29 years old, but he will be 30 when the season starts. But I was reading something where the Steelers are okay if they don't get Aaron Rodgers. And there's still a possibility, if Rodgers decides to move on and retire, that Kirk Cousins could be the Steelers' move. But in reading this story out of Pittsburgh, it was like the players love Rudolph, the coaches love Rudolph. Come on, man. You can't go into a season with Mason Rudolph as your starting quarterback, can you? I don't think you can. They drafted, by the way, the Ohio State quarterback, Will Howard. I don't think he is, certainly not as a rookie. He's not going to be, I don't think, a starting quarterback, but, who knows? Anyway, back to, Shadur. So the 21st pick was thought to be, well, he's not going to get by 21. His over-under on draft position, odds-wise, went from 9.5, which was the New Orleans spot for several months, to 21.5 as we approached last Thursday, which was the Steelers' position. And everybody said, look, if the Steelers don't take him, he's not going to get picked in the first round. And then it'll be, unless somebody trades back into the end of the first round. That was the discussion, right? If somebody trades back into the end of the first round, fine. But if not, it's going to be at the top of the second round. It's going to be, Cleveland at the top of the second round because they had 2 picks to start the second round after they traded with Jacksonville. There was the possibility of the Saints at 40 overall in the second half, but the Steelers didn't have a second-round pick. Nobody thought that he would get past the second round. People were saying a week ago today, Shadur Sanders may not go in the first round. That was a distinct possibility at that point. But anyway, the draft comes about. And Shadur Sanders, by the way, made the decision not to show up for the draft in Green Bay because I guess he felt there was a possibility that he might not get picked in the first round, although he threw a hell of a party with his brand legendary, marked all over the scene in which he was holding this draft party for the weekend last weekend. So the draft comes last week. We get one quarterback taken at number 1 overall, Cam Ward, expected. And then the Giants made a move into the draft. One of the things that I wish I had said before the draft, because, we get so much right about the draft, is that what made sense actually for a trade back into the first round of the draft was at pick number 25 with Houston right before the Rams picked, because the Rams were supposedly looking for the replacement, the eventual replacement for Matt Stafford. And they may have taken a quarterback at 25. And the Giants clearly thought the Rams had a chance to take a quarterback at 25, or there was a chance they were going to take a quarterback at 25. And it may have been Jackson Dart. And when the Giants traded into that spot at 25, one ahead of the Rams with Houston, everybody held their collective breath. Is this where Shadur Sanders goes? Because remember, during the offseason, Dion had said, there are certain places he's not going to play. They played their, Archie Manning. Dion played his Archie Manning hand from back in the 2004 draft when they held Eli back from going to the Chargers and they forced a trade. And so there was a lot of discussion. I'm sure most of you know a lot of the story going into it with respect to Dion, suggesting that there were certain teams he was not going to allow his son to play for. We were going to kind of dictate where he got picked. That kind of looks silly in hindsight. But anyway, the Giants jumped up and they took Jackson Dart in the first round, quarterback Ole Miss. And then you just started to see quarterbacks come off the board on night 2. No Shadur Sanders. Tyler Shook, second round to the Saints. Jalen Milroe, third round to the Seahawks. And then the shocker. The Cleveland Browns are going to take a quarterback late in the third round. Here we go. And they select Dillon Gabriel, who, by the way, going into this draft, was not supposed to be drafted anywhere near the third round. In fact, some, analysts had an undrafted free agent grade on Dillon Gabriel. And the reason being, Dillon Gabriel is like 5'9". I will tell you this, though, about Dillon Gabriel. I'm not sure last year in college football, I watched a quarterback that processed and got the ball out quicker than Dillon Gabriel. Part of that is the, Oregon offense. Understood. But he is super quick processing, super quick release. And somebody, the Browns apparently, saw maybe the next Drew Brees, a left-handed version of Drew Brees. So they took Dillon Gabriel, and then night 2 ended, and Shadur Sanders was still on the clock. Well, he's got to get picked early in the fourth round, right? Nope. He didn't get picked until the 5th round by the Cleveland Browns after they picked Dillon Gabriel. Oh, by the way, Cleveland traded up to pick 144 to select Shadur Sanders. So he's taken there at 144 out of a draft, by the way, that has 257 players taken. So he was in the back half of this NFL draft in the 5th round. Again, how much earlier he was supposed to be taken is debatable. But it's clear as we approach the draft that the teams were on a different page than the mock drafters and some of the analysts out there. I personally think by the time we'd gotten to Thursday, there was a consensus that he might not be picked in the first round. There was a media consensus, which was starting to agree with the NFL, front office consensus. So, look, the Shadur Sanders situation, in many ways, there are a lot of layers to this story. Dion, to what Edward wrote, collusion. I'll get to that here in a moment. College players like Shadur Sanders being massive stars at the college level and earning lots of money, close to $6, $7, maybe $8 million over 2 years at Colorado. There's a lot to this story you could get into, in terms of race, in terms of, league and ownership and quarterbacks, etc. I just don't think it's that complex. I think there are a lot of layers that are worth, going into and contemplating. And I've done that over the last several days. And to me, it's kind of easy. Shadur Sanders just flat out was not a first round caliber prospect, period. If you watched college football over the last 2 years, it was impossible to miss Colorado games. It started in 2023 when Colorado, in Dion's first game as the coach, with his son Shiloh and with Shadur and with Travis Hunter, they opened up with TCU. What a football game that was. 45-42. Colorado beat TCU. And it was like, wow. And Shadur was incredible. He threw 4 touchdown passes. He threw for over 500 yards. The next week, they beat up on a better defensive team in Nebraska. He wasn't as impressive. And then the third week, they went to overtime and beat Colorado State in a thriller. And you're like, this dude's pretty good. What you're really thinking, though, is, God, this Travis Hunter is ridiculous. What ended up happening, though, was TCU was not a good team that year. They were a bad defensive team. Nebraska was not a good team. Colorado State was not a good team. And they ran up against Oregon in week 4 of the 2023 season. And I'll never forget it, because here's Colorado, the story of the college football season in 2023. There's no doubt. I mean, Dion and Shadur and Shiloh and Travis Hunter had taken over the sport in the early portion of the schedule and the calendar in September. And they had to go to Oregon, which, by the way, was a Pac-12 team that year. Oregon was a 21-point favorite. That was crazy. You're like, what? Well, the odds makers knew Colorado wasn't very good. They weren't very good at all, actually. In fact, they stunk in 2023. Bad football team in 2023. They got run completely out of the building. 42-6 was the final score. This was the game in which Oregon coach Dan Lanning afterwards said, they're playing for clicks, we're playing for wins. But let me just say, early on, as a massive college football fan, I thought Shadur looked the part, man. He was smooth. He had a presence about him. There was a certain charisma that he's always had in terms of his personality, the way he speaks, the way he plays. It's very kind of, smooth, casual. Of course, it hurts him too. But he looked good early on. And then the more and more you watched him during his college football career, as they played better teams and higher caliber competition, you realized, if you were being honest, he's just okay. And then this year, it's like, yeah, he's a backup quarterback. Denton and I had these conversations, a few times during the college football season, and I said, I don't see it. Denton saw it a little bit more than me with respect to, he thought Shadur, would at least be a first rounder. I'm like, this dude's a backup quarterback. Cam Ward is so much better of a prospect. That was when we were kind of debating the prospect, positioning, Ward or Shadur. I just didn't think any of the quarterbacks, this was just a bad quarterback year. I'm a big Cam Ward fan. I actually think Cam Ward's got a chance to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. We'll see. Who knows? We're wrong about quarterbacks 2/3 of the time. So is the league. But I said multiple times during the season, I just don't see it. Thank God we don't have to pick a quarterback this year. Thank God we're not desperate for a quarterback this year. And there were teams desperate for quarterbacks, New Orleans, the Giants, the Browns, the Steelers, and they didn't see it either. See, here's the thing, Edward, back to your, your email in which you suggest that the draft is much more than just being this, crapshoot that it turns into every year, which it is. Doesn't make it any less fun to consume as a football fan. But, when you said that it's a lot more than just, the unpredictable, impossible to predict part of it. It's a chance for the NFL to make a statement on players and families they don't like. Shadur Sanders and family should sue the league for what happened over the weekend. It was disgusting. This was the reaction that I think anybody that was following this story saw a lot of the reaction. It was collusion. It was, it was Dion. It was race. It was all of these different things, And then you started to hear, by the way, from a lot of the reporters, good reporters in the NFL, all of the stories coming out about how poorly he interviewed. I read one of the stories that, oh God, I want to say it was Peter Schrager. It may have been somebody else, but a higher quality NFL reporter told the story about how, and we know this to be true because Mike Shanahan's told us this before, that one of the things teams do when they're interviewing quarterbacks prior to a draft to kind of gauge the kind of team player that quarterback is they'll actually put on some of the really bad plays that the quarterback had. I'll never forget Mike telling us the story on the air about the big concern. He had multiple concerns about RG3 before drafting him, and he shared those concerns with Dan and with Bruce. Number one was they were going to have to play football a completely different way because he was just not ready to be a traditional, pocket passer. He just wasn't asked to do that at Baylor, and he wasn't comfortable doing that. And so it was going to take time for this quarterback to become a well-rounded quarterback. So they were going to have to play football a different way to get him on the field. So he expressed that and emphasized that with Bruce and Dan before that draft. The other thing he shared with us, I'll never forget on the air, he said, we put on, I think it was Oklahoma State they were playing, and he had one of his worst games, and they put some of the plays on tape, and they watched him together. And he said, Robert, and I think he said it was his father or somebody else who was there, they could not, get to quickly enough throwing the coach, Art Briles, and the play calling under the bus. It was just one, blaming of somebody else for a couple of picks, a couple of bad decisions. And he said that was a concern. And he said that, when you hear that from a player, it's a concern because they haven't been able to deal with adversity and haven't, they don't handle it naturally. And that was the message to Dan and Bruce was, number one, we're going to have to play football a completely different way, which they did. They went to, the pistol, and they used RG3 as a true dual threat quarterback his rookie year, which had never been done in the NFL, not to the extent to which Washington had done it. And number two, they were really concerned about what would happen and how he would handle adversity. So fast forward to this draft, all the stories are coming out about the way Shadur, interviewed, and some teams just crossed him off the list because he was an off-putting interview. But one of the specific stories was they put on some of his bad plays. A team that had a need for quarterback put on some of the bad plays, and he essentially said to the room, "Look, if you don't want to draft me, that's fine. There are plenty of other teams that do." Yeah, that's not the right answer. If that's true, that's not the right answer. Taking accountability is the right way. So, look, I think this is a story that has some interesting angles. I'm not going to deny that, including the angle of having a player on the team with Dion and his presence looming over the franchise at that point. But for me, it comes down to this more than anything else. He was not a first-round prospect, period. His play indicated that. He didn't partake in a lot of the opportunities to prove in the offseason that some of the stuff they were seeing on tape wasn't him. It was more the offensive line. It was more, the competition or the lack thereof. I mean, he had multiple, NFL receivers on his team, including the best one in the country. But they had some offensive line issues, especially in 23, not as much in 2024. And they had a better season in 2024. But he was not a first-round prospect, okay? So let's just start there, because all of the other stuff we can have a conversation about in terms of why he dropped to the 5th round instead of going in the 2nd or 3rd, which was probably more commensurate with the prospect that he was. But you have to understand that if you watch this player and the NFL, was telling everybody basically, I don't think so. And we got that as we got closer to the draft. They just didn't see him as a first-round prospect because he wasn't a first-round prospect. Now, should all of those quarterbacks have been taken before him? Should we have seen, here's the number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks, Ward, Dart, Shook, Milroe, and Gabriel taken before Shadur Sanders? Was he a better prospect than Dylan Gabriel? Actually, I think he probably was, but Dylan Gabriel had certain facets of his game that were clearly more advanced than Shadur Sanders. Shadur Sanders took way too many sacks, held onto the ball way too long, did not process quickly. I thought he had good pocket presence. He also didn't have great arm strength, and he also was not the athlete his father was. Nowhere near the athlete Cam Ward is, or obviously not the athlete Jalen Milroe is. But you start with this, and I don't think this is actually debatable. He wasn't a first-round prospect. So then you go to this. You go to, is the juice worth the squeeze? If he's a backup NFL quarterback or a low-end starter, let's just say some team saw him as maybe at some point a low-end NFL starter, is the juice worth the squeeze? It's not a direct comparison, a direct analogy to the Kaepernick situation. I think one of the things that gets overlooked in the Kaepernick situation, even when you talk about it in hindsight, he was not a starting quarterback at that point in his career. Period. He was not one of the best 32. He was one of the best 64. There's no doubt that Colin Kaepernick, what are we talking about now? 8, 9 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was not a starting quarterback, but he was definitely one of the best 64. He would have been a really solid high-level backup quarterback. But was it worth it? Was the circus that came with Kaepernick, which, by the way, also included, and this is where it's different than Shadur, that came with business impact. Like, there were people that were boycotting the NFL to a certain degree, and imagine the team that had Kaepernick on it, they would have gone nuts because they felt that he was not patriotic. We don't need to go down that argument. It's not about that. It's about comparing it to Shadur. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze to bring the media, have it descend on your team, have many of your customers say, bad team. I'm not spending money on your team anymore for a guy that was going to be your backup. Shadur Sanders, different reasons, same thing. Was the juice worth it to bring Shadur Sanders onto your team when you saw him as a low-end starter or a backup in this league, when you were going to have a kid that seemed entitled, at least according to the reports, seemed to lack much self-awareness at all with respect to, how he handled his interviews, didn't interview well. Look, when you are, a draft prospect and you go through these interviews, it's just like a job interview. Okay? You're not dictating to them. Now, sometimes you're in position to do that. He wasn't. There clearly was a detached sort of reality for the Sanders in terms of the prospect that they thought he thought he was, and the way the NFL viewed him. So you got into the second round, and it's like, are we going to take this on? And then, by the way, have Dion hovering. By the way, I like Deion. Just as an aside, I've always liked Deion. I love Deion as a player. I like Deion as a coach. Deion's straight old school. It's actually surprising that some of the things that came out with him saying outwardly, yeah, we're not going to let him play for that team. He didn't say it specifically about Cleveland, but there's that one interview where he's like, yeah, Cleveland, no, we would really like the Giants. But he talked about, pulling the Archie Manning, move. By the way, those that think that Archie Manning skated free during that whole time, you've got a terrible memory. He was lit up. People were furious with the Mannings and what they pulled back then. But, we didn't have social media. It was a different media landscape. But you get to teams wondering, is it worth it? Is it worth it to bring him on? Finally, Cleveland said fifth rounder, because as a fifth rounder versus a second rounder, if it doesn't work out, and by the way, there's no guarantee it will, they can cut him. I mean, they don't have much invested in him. There were better players with less noise in the earlier rounds. I was surprised they took Dylan Gabriel and then traded back for Shadur Sanders. But look, all you got to do is, if you really believe it's collusion, I mean, that is way out there. This league is about winning football games. Cam Newton, his stock was dropping big time before the 2011 draft. Cam Newton was thought to be arrogant, entitled, going to be a difficult teammate. There were people questioning how bright he was and how capable he was from an intellect standpoint to play the position. Remember, he had taken the money to go to Auburn, which was illegal back then. And there were a lot of teams, basically in a lot of reporting, Cam could drop big time, but he didn't. You know why? Because he was a legitimate first-round prospect. He was a legitimate first player in the draft prospect, and that's where Carolina picked him. How about a year ago, Caleb Williams? How about all this stuff about Caleb Williams throughout that spring? Remember, initially it was, we may pull, a Manning kind of thing and dictate where we want to go. There was a lot of that. The equity. Remember them discussing that maybe Caleb Williams would be the first player to receive, as part of his compensation structure, equity in the team. There was a lot going around about Caleb Williams. What happened? Too much talent. Too good of a prospect as a football player. Pick number 1 overall. That's not what Shadur Sanders was. He was not a first-round prospect. And then it became about, is this really worth it to bring the circus to town by taking him and putting him on our team as a backup quarterback and maybe one day as a low-end starter? Now, the good news for him is he got picked. He's going to go to a team that does not have a definitive starter at this point. I mean, the Browns, they've got 40-year-old Joe Flacco. They've got Dylan Gabriel, who they picked. They got Deshaun Watson, whose career clearly seems to be over. They've got Kenny Pickett. Like, he's got a chance to go in and completely change the narrative on him personally, the surrounding cast, and him as a player. There's an opportunity to compete for a starting job in Cleveland. So for a young person who, by the way, has made a lot of money in his, very young life so far playing football in college, you'd love to see kind of a total turn on the narrative. I think the chances are almost 50-50. He either ends up being an NFL quarterback at some level, or the Browns could move on from him before the season even starts. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Your thoughts on Shadur Sanders dropping to the 5th round. Why did it happen? We'll take calls on that. 11 a.m., we'll talk some NBA with Chris Miles. We'll get into this stadium issue with Barry's Verluga at 12, and we'll definitely talk some Skins draft with Fred Smoot next hour as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're streaming live 10 to 1 every day on Team 980's YouTube page. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like thumbs up for us if you don't mind. Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports reported yesterday, I think it was, that Shadur Sanders on purpose sandbagged many of the interviews, meaning he intentionally did poorly because he didn't want to play in those places. Jonathan Jones said, quote, at some of those combine meetings with certain teams that maybe Shadur Sanders didn't really want to go to, I was told that he more or less sandbagged in those interviews. I don't know if he didn't take them seriously, what it was, but he did not give it his all in some of those interviews, rubbed some teams the wrong way. And it was, earlier in the season where Dion had said there's certain cities where it ain't going to happen. It's going to be an Eli situation. We ain't doing that. Closed quote. Obviously, they got to a point in the draft where any team that picked him was okay. And it ended up being a team in which Dion had actually said no about, which was Cleveland. Early on. Also, so many of the stories are coming out about various interviews pre-draft with him. And the Giants seem to be the biggest leakers of these stories, for what it's worth, because it would appear as if some of the reporting is that the meeting in which they showed him some of his bad plays, and he essentially said, maybe I'm not the guy for you. As they were showing the bad plays, that may have been in New York. Yeah, that's not a good answer, And there is, remember, tone and context to everything. But yeah, I think there's enough smoke around Shadur's interview situation leading up to the draft to know that the interview process did not go well. And look, like, these players now are, relatively speaking, wealthy heading into these interviews. He earned somewhere between $6 and $10 million in the 2 years at Colorado. He's a busy guy managing his money. And this is going to be part of the challenge. We've seen this, overall in sports now, is that, on one hand, it's good that teams can see what these players are like once they make money, because that was always a big issue. What is he going to be like when he finally starts making money for the first time in his life? Will he be as dedicated to the game? They can see that a little bit coming in, but also they're dealing in many cases with guys who, have some decision-making ability in terms of happiness, in terms of lifestyle, etc. But if you want to play in the NFL, the rules still apply. There's a draft, and the team that drafts you is the team you got to go to. All right, what's your reaction? To me, I'll net it out. It's a lot simpler than a lot of the layered complexities that people have tried to create. He wasn't a first-round prospect, and then it became about, is it really worth it to bring him and the entire media circus to town for a guy that's going to be a backup quarterback, or maybe at some point down the road, a low-end starter? And then, if you throw onto it, we didn't like him when we interviewed him. I'm going to leave that out of it, because I think the simple part is he wasn't a first-round prospect, and then it's about, are there other prospects that are just better at these spots, and we don't have to deal with the three-ring, reaction to it. All right, phone lines are open, 301-230-0980. Want to hear your reaction to something we just haven't had a chance to get to this week, the Shadur Sanders story, which, by the way, became a story in the way it was covered. Mel Kiper was all in on Shadur Sanders being his number one quarterback, and he went off. I'm a big Mel fan, and anybody that's ever known Mel a lot more than people like me, he's one of the most beloved people that's ever worked in sports broadcasting. But that it hijacked the night. I actually found it to be kind of entertaining, and the ratings were through the roof, so I don't think ESPN's complaining. But ultimately, it just became much more about Shadur Sanders than anybody else that was picked, including, by the way, Cam Ward at number one overall. We got a little bit of Cam Ward when he got picked, and then after that, it was all about Shadur. Now, I didn't watch every network on Thursday night. I watched primarily the ESPN pro coverage, with Kuiper, et cetera, Riddick. And by the way, I think Louis Riddick, he's not my favorite, but I think he does a really good job on the NFL draft coverage. Really good job. He is really prepared. I did not watch a lot of the NFL Network stuff. All right, phone line's open, 301-230-0980. Let's start with my guy Robert in Annapolis. Robert, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Now, remember, Mel Kiper also thought Jimmy Clausen was the number one rated draft. So, Mel actually went to my high school's rival high school up in Baltimore. But anyhow, I agree with you totally. That's exactly what it was. He was not rated to the level that they thought he was, or his family thought he was, or these prognosticators. There's a difference between scouts and general managers think and what prognosticators think. But you referenced the man. You didn't mention your boy, the original
Elway
holdout.
Yeah,
yes.
but remember, of course, John Elway. Which, by the way,
remember what the issue was? Do you remember what the issue was?
Yeah, it was Irsay.
No, it was an issue between John Elway's father, Jack Elway, who I believe was in coaching out west, and Frank Cush, who was
the coach.
Frank Cush, who came out of Arizona State. So I forget the exact situation, but there was a problem with John Elway's father having his son play for Frank Cush. That's where all that, other than the fact that, Baltimore had fallen.
But Robert, remember, there was a big difference between John Elway and Eli Manning. John Elway had baseball legitimately as an option. He was drafted very high by the Yankees, and he could use baseball as, look, if I end up going to Baltimore, I'm going to go play baseball. Eli didn't have baseball as an option.
I remember that. I always thought that was a bit of a bluff. Yes, he may have had that option. He was never going to be the baseball player he was as a football player. But I want to ask you this. Maybe you know this answer because I don't. Is it possible now, or do you think it will come about with these players? They have to, for the NFL, have to be in college for 2 years. I forget there's an age restriction that doesn't apply like to the NBA or something like that.
3 years from high school.
Okay.
3 years from high school.
All right, can they declare and get drafted? And now with the money in college, suppose they don't like their situation, can they just go back if they still have eligibility and play in college, or do they have to drop down to a lower division? I'm just wondering what the options.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and the rules just keep changing. I think once you declare for the draft, you're in the draft, and your eligibility is up in college. I think there's a deadline to which you can't return.
All right, but suppose you don't get drafted.
That's always been an issue. Yes. I mean, look, for players that don't get drafted, whether it's basketball or football over the years, I've always felt like that's silly that they don't let them go back and play college sports. And by the way, also, potentially if they're interested, have a chance to get their degree.
All right. Thanks for taking my call. But I think that's going to come about. There's going to be, as things change, players are going to be able to go back to college if they don't want to go with the team that drafted them. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Thanks. Let's go to EJ in D.C. EJ, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Yeah. I want to say this about Shadur Sanders. It's always a double standard when it comes to black quarterbacks. And I know it's a lot of them. And the thing I'm saying is, Mel Kiper, all them had him rated high all this year. Everybody had him rated high all this year. And
except
when it
for
comes
the NFL
to the draft,
scouts, yeah.
I mean, that's remain to be seen because everybody had Mel Kiper have never been that far off. Todd McShay has never been that far off about a quarterback. And all of a sudden, with Shadur, if it's because of his baggage and the media's and his out of football entrepreneurship and all that, I agree. You might don't want that in your locker room. But don't try to downplay his talent. None of them quarterbacks besides Cam Ward was more talented on the field or productive on the field than him. None of them were.
the production argument, it doesn't fly because you've had many quarterbacks that have had almost, historic numbers not get picked or get picked very late in drafts. Look, you mentioned Kuiper. You know who else he was dead wrong about? Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel was supposed to go super high, but there were major issues in the evaluation of Johnny Manziel, the person. By the way, also a short quarterback, and that ended up playing into it as well. And now he did drop significantly, but still went in the first round.
But they drafted a 5'9" quarterback before they drafted Shadur.
But I know they did. I know. Dylan Gabriel getting picked before him is a head scratcher for me too. But I didn't like I didn't think he was a first round talent. EJ, I just didn't. I mean, what do we know? But I just didn't see an NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think he was second round. But all I'm saying is you just can't hear this talent. Now, I don't know if I would have wanted him on my team because I understand what you're saying about the locker room. He's going to walk in there. I seen an interview where the guy asked him, said, well, when you get your check, what you going to buy? What you want? And you know what he said? He said, I already bought everything I want. Yeah. So I can understand that that about him not being draftable because of that. But his talent on the field, Tyler Shuck, he hasn't showed you more than Shadur Sanders. What you gonna say?
Well, he actually looks more in the part because he's 6'5" and he's a big strapping dude. But I'm with you on Shadur. It sounds like we agree. Neither one of us think that he was a first round talent, which immediately means you go to part two of this, which is okay. You see him as a low end starter, maybe, but more likely than not, a backup quarterback. Do you want all that comes with drafting him as a potential backup quarterback? And I think that's where the slide really took
But one
place.
more thing, and I'm not saying you, right? But other people on these talk shows and I listen, right? They did the same thing to Trent Williams. When Trent was leaving, they said Trent was no more good. He fell off. He did this.
Well, that was our dumb organization.
He was nothing. And he didn't, that organization I'm talking about on these sports channels. Everybody was talking about Trent fell off. He wasn't that good no more. He's not worth this and he's not worth that. And now he's back to the same way he was all the time. All I'm using that for is sometimes if you don't like a person because of the off the field stuff or whatever, you don't have to dilute his talent. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Thanks for the call. Yeah. I was going to say something else before you said that. Trent Williams had the issues really with the organization over the cancer diagnosis, which he blamed the organization for not being more proactive when a lot of people in the organization they essentially were saying behind the scenes, they were the ones trying to set up these doctor's appointments, and it took a while for Trent to actually act on them. And they didn't like that he had thrown Dan in particular under the bus because Dan had been such a big supporter of the player during, remember, weed suspensions, etc., during the early portion of his career. All right. Let's see if we can get another call in after the break. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right, last night, the Nats lose on a wild pitch after taking the lead in the ninth. Bryson Stott came home to score. The Nats lose 7-6. They'll continue their series tonight. Pregame at 6:15 right here on the Team 980. UNC personnel is increasingly worried that Jordan Hudson's influence on Bill Belichick, quote, could become a problem, end quote, per TMZ Sports. Belichick and Hudson's recent appearance on CBS Morning's interview is, quote, not sitting well, end quote, with UNC. The Washington Capitals look to close out their series against the Montreal Canadiens. Alex Ovechkin was not on the ice yesterday. That was just a maintenance day. He was on the ice this morning for a morning skate. Logan Thompson was the first goalie off the ice. He will get the start. Taylor Radish was skating with scratches, and Alexei Protas came off with the rest of the team. You'll likely see him tonight as well. Pregame at 6:45 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980 and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and to turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
Yes, I'm wearing a Washington football team hoodie, but it does not have Commanders anywhere on it. Just so those of you that were upset. No, I have a couple of things, and I didn't even purchase them, that have the W on it. That's all I own. I have like a hoodie that I'm wearing now with the W on it, and I have I have a hat with a W on it. I don't have anything that says Commanders, just for those of you that seem to care so much. But thanks for watching. We are streaming on the YouTube 980 channel.
Check out my
Please
Fun Bunch
subscribe
t-shirt too.
and hit the like button. What'd you say?
Got a Fun Bunch t-shirt that I came in
Look at that.
yesterday.
You old school Fun Bunch.
Old school,
Nice.
baby.
Nicely
Sorry,
done.
if
All right,
we were
let's
doing
get another
apparel talk,
call
I had to
in.
plug it in.
What'd you say?
If we were doing apparel talk, I had to plug it a little bit.
There you go. Robert in Ocean City. Robert, quickly go.
Yes. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Robert.
You talk about the production. Yes, you talk about the production aspect. Remember, Cole Brennan shattered all college records, and he fizzled out in the NFL. He was a training camp hero for Washington back in the day. But I heard a report that Shadur Sanders only took 1 or 2 snaps under center, so he's really never been trained to have his back turned against the defense. And
that's a lot of college quarterbacks, though. Cam Ward had same thing.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. But I just want to know: do you think Cleveland's going to maximize that 5th-round value and turn him into a Cordell Stewart, Antoine Randall L type flash?
He's not athletic
person, or
he's not an athletic player. No, he's not Cordell Stewart or Antoine Randall L. He's a pocket passer. That's really, he's got excellent pocket presence. He doesn't process quickly enough at this point, doesn't throw with enough anticipation. He doesn't have a big arm. But no, that's not the kind of quarterback he is. He's not that guy. His comp was Kirk Cousins. By the way, drafted in the 4th round. If he can have the career Kirk had, drafted in the 5th round, I think he'd take it. Lap in D.C. Lap, finish it up for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Hey,
what's up, Lap? You're on.
Chapman, thanks.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, I think he dropped down a lot too from his father. I mean, his talent is there. You know what I'm saying? He can actually play. But I would like to see him on the field. And there were some teams I did want him to go to: the Giants, either Cleveland, Saints, or Pittsburgh. We had a legitimate chance to actually play. So I guess we're going to see. He already got money. So now it's about playing and legacy and, you know what I'm saying, his future. Hey, Kevin, quick question. What do you, because you said he wasn't a first-round talent, do you think he's comparable on the same level of any of those other quarterbacks that got picked in the 1st round, like McCarthy or Drake May? So
they're different, right? Like Jalen Milroe is completely different. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Milroe got picked for a completely different reason. Thanks, by the way, for the call. He's not Cam Ward. I personally view Jackson Dart and Tyler Shook as backup quarterbacks or low-end starters in the league. That's my view. What do I know? Dylan Gabriel's the one that surprises me because he is super short. And you just don't see many examples of super short quarterbacks succeeding. Now, he processes lightning quick. I mean, super quick. So there is that. All right, let's move on. Some wild NBA games last night in the postseason. Chris Miles from NBA TV next.
Halliburton. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Halliburton for the lead. 1.3 to go. Pacers by 1. Porter to inbound it, no. Giannis is going to take it now. Here's Gary Trent Jr. Lets it fly. And the Pacers are moving on. What a comeback in overtime by Indiana.
Yeah, that game last night, insane. The Pacers overcame a 7-point deficit in the final 35 seconds to shock Milwaukee in overtime, 119-118. That was about the only shot that Gary Trent missed over the final 20 or so minutes. The heave from three-quarters court. Joining me right now to talk some NBA playoffs, which is what I'm looking forward to doing, is Chris Miles. Chris, of course, a host at NBA TV. He was here for a while at NBC Sports Washington. You can follow him on X, on Twitter, at Chris Miles TV. I'm so into this right now, and I have been from the jump. And, you know this town. It's been all draft, and then this week it's been all stadium talk, etc. But these playoffs have been unbelievable, especially the last couple of days. I actually want to start with last night in Indiana. Look, I thought Milwaukee put up an incredible effort. I thought they were going to go out meekly last night in 5. But I want to ask you about why you thought they blew the lead at the end, the follow-up with Giannis and Halliburton's father, and then where Giannis goes. Let's start with just the end of the game and the meltdown by the Bucks.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things happening, and that's exactly why we had a 30-minute show discussing all of those things, right? Yeah. Like, as soon as the buzzer ended, there was so much to talk about, including Giannis's post-game press conference where he really opened up. So let's get to your first question, right? The Milwaukee Bucks, I believe the Pacers scored 8 points in the last 33 seconds is the stat, right? And it's 2 turnovers, both by Gary Trent Jr., who had 12 points in overtime. Like you said, he had made 7 threes after halftime, after going 0 for 7 from three-point range in the first half. Yeah. Okay, so that was the big story. Gary Trent Jr., will he be able to do this? Can the Bucks come back from being down 3-1 with Giannis, having a 30-20-10 game, which is only the 4th player in NBA history to do that in the playoffs, right? Like, that's what was happening. And as soon as they turned the ball over, you're like, this is a new storyline. The reason they lost is they didn't have ball handlers. I mean, A.J. Green is throwing a pass to Gary Trent Jr., who's a spot-up shooter. So it's one spot-up shooter throwing it to another spot-up shooter, which are the type of players you want to put around Giannis. But when you don't have Damian Lillard on the floor, or Chris Middleton that they traded away to the Wizards, right? Or, if you want to go even back further, Drew Holiday, that's where those players excelled and helped the Bucks to win and, win a championship. They don't have that anymore. And you saw the collapse. I mean, A.J. Green threw it to the only place where Gary Trent Jr. couldn't catch it, in between his legs at the floor. Right? Like, I mean, if you play basketball, there's like one place where you can't save the ball if it's thrown in your direction. Where you're like, what is he like? You could have anywhere else, and the game's over. So kudos to Tyrese Halliburton, though, not settling for a 3. We see that so much in the NBA where guys, get in a situation like, I'm just going to shoot this 3. Halliburton, who actually struggled to score in the 4th quarter OT, made the most timely buckets, and that's kind of him. Where you're like, maybe he's not as good as these other stars in the league. And then the game comes down to the final 30 seconds or the final possessions, and he looks like one of the best players we've ever seen. And that's like what happened with Tyrese Halliburton. So it's just amazing, isn't it?
I thought it was interesting because, he got a screen and a switch, and it was almost like he wanted Giannis to guard him. And he went right around him. Like that seemed to me to be not the matchup that he would have wanted in that situation to drive the ball or even to take a jump shot.
Well, here's the thing you learn about, being around some of these players as far as their basketball IQ. It's so much higher than we realize as far as them understanding other players' tendencies. And, you always hear in the NBA, they don't play defense. Tyrese Halliburton, I bet you if we listened into what he had to say, he probably knew, okay, if I get Giannis on me, he's going to go all out if I look like I'm going to shoot the three, right? Like he probably had that in his mind. And we all know Tyrese Halliburton has that slow windup. So for Giannis, you can wait till he picks the ball up, right? Yeah. He's not like a quick release Steph Curry type. And Halliburton uses basketball IQ to take advantage of an over-aggressive defender. And we see Giannis hurt his hand being over-aggressive on defense. Like that's kind of, I mean, if you're going to knock someone who is an all-time great, over-aggressive on defense is kind of like a thing you can expect from him if you're someone who has the ball in their hands.
You mentioned Giannis, 30, 20, and 13, along with 2 blocks and 2 steals. He had 7 turnovers. He also missed a bunch of free throws, which were hurtful. But so for those that weren't watching last night, after Indiana pulls off this miracle comeback to end the series and advance to the second round, Milwaukee's done. After the game, Tyrese Halliburton's father, John, confronted Giannis, apparently cussing him out on the floor. You can kind of get into, what the confrontation was, whether or not he should be there. But, Giannis, per usual, had a very thoughtful response afterwards and said that was uncalled for, loves Tyrese Halliburton as a player, etc. So just give everybody who did not watch what, took place when this game ended, kind of a quick, what happened and then your thoughts on it.
Well, so there's a number of things because we did hear Giannis's perspective as opposed to what we see as viewers. First and foremost, the game ends at the heave by Gary Trent Jr., right? Giannis inbounded the ball and was behind the play, and you kind of see him soaking it all in, right? Like he's standing there like, man, we really just lost in the first round for a third straight year. Well, Tyrese Halliburton's dad is sitting behind the basket from where Giannis inbounded the ball. He jumps up. He obviously has on a Tyrese Halliburton jersey. He has a big poster, a big towel with his son's face on it. And this is where it goes awry because the ball's in the air and it drops. And Giannis is kind of like, wow, right? And you see Tyrese Halliburton's dad walk directly in front of Giannis, and Giannis stops moving. And he puts the towel up. And according to Giannis, Tyrese Halliburton's dad was cursing at him, right? Like that's who F word, S word, right? Like this is what Giannis says happened. So we understand this to be true because Tyrese Halliburton has said that that's what happened, and Tyrese Halliburton's dad said the same thing. Now, talking to several people, which I did have the privilege last night, right? I watched it myself, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, where's security? Like, security is not supposed to let fans on the court immediately, even if it's someone's dad. And it's interesting to hear the different perspectives, right? Because I sat next to Vince Carter. I showed him the video for the first time. And he's like, what is this? What is going on here? Like, no parent or brother is supposed to get on the court and do that, right? Then Giannis laments about his upbringing and how you should be humble in your winning, which I thought is what we need to hear from NBA stars, right? Like, that's what you need to hear. But then from a complete different perspective, I walked back, and I think the Clippers Nuggets game was still on. And, we were done talking about the Bucks Pacers. And I go to talk to Chuck, Kenny, and Shaq about it, right? Because we were sitting there watching the game.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard the clip. So Shaq like beckons me over. So I guess that they must have discussed this on the show. I have not seen the clip that you're referencing right now, right? And he's like, Chris, you know, like, he's got to have thicker skin than that. I'm like, no, you can't have fans on the court. And then Shaq's like, look, man, I heard worse things when I was playing at LSU. Like these things, my parents taught me that you just kind of like have to be the bigger man. And I'm like, Shaq, Giannis didn't move. He looked at Tyrese Halliburton's dad. He's like, well, look what he did after. He grabbed Ben Matherin's head and he did. I'm like, you know what? You're right. Giannis probably shouldn't be talking to this man's dad in that way. And he's like, and Shaq is explaining, you've never seen me act like that. And it's interesting to hear his perspective, right? Of basically saying you can't double down the wrong and that Giannis is wrong for escalating this situation. And I hadn't thought of it like that. And I'm like, man, like it's incredible to hear one of the greatest players of all time give his perspective and to not be on, because in my mind, I'm thinking Shaq's all like, yeah, Giannis, good stuff. And Shaq's like, nope, you can't do that. Like, you're big, you're strong, You have to, go about your business, take it for what it is, and move on with your life and go, discuss it in the press conference. But what he was saying is Giannis was out of pocket for all of the extra stuff. And it kind of changed my perspective. And I thought it was like phenomenal to have that privilege to hear that. Now, what he said on the show, I don't know if that's what he said. But it was interesting to hear from him.
Yeah. So hold on, Max. You have the Shaq comment on this? Because I was watching it when he said it. Do you have that?
Yeah, sure do.
How long is it?
A minute 20.
All right. Go ahead, play it, and Chris can listen to it.
No, he's not supposed to be on the court.
It don't
he's
matter.
not supposed to be on the court.
Giannis talked to him. Forget all that.
No, he was on the court.
So what?
You think he said something? He probably know who his dad is.
Stop it. Giannis said something.
No, because he's on the court in his face.
So what? Everybody on the court.
You can't do that.
Yeah, you can.
No, you cannot do that.
Giannis said something to him.
So you think his dad was
great?
No, his dad was 100% wrong.
Giannis is wrong? Bro, Giannis said something to him.
No, he did not.
Yes, he did.
No, he not.
Look, right there.
No, his dad is coming up to him. What is his dad doing on the court? His dad is not supposed to be on the court. You can yell as much as you want to. He's an idiot. If you think that's right, you're an idiot too.
Giannis said something.
No, that's not true. No, I'm just telling you. That dad is an idiot. If you think he's an idiot, you're an idiot too.
I will say that
no.
Dad is always on the court.
I will say this. We all have met his dad, and he has.
His dad's always on the court.
He should be on the court.
You don't have an entitlement because your son is playing to be on the court.
Hold on, time out. He's always on the court.
He shouldn't be on the court.
I don't care. He's always on the court.
He should not be on the court talking to other players.
Bro, Giannis said something to him. He didn't say nothing to
Giannis.
No, he did not.
No, that's not true.
He couldn't have said anything in the line behind his son.
What do you mean walking in line behind his son? He shouldn't be on the court. He didn't play in the game.
Always on the court.
No, he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be
on the court.
No,
there's no entitlement for
on the court.
So let me just mention there was more to that where Shaq kind of expressed what he expressed to you, Chris, because I want to say that I had the exact same reaction you did. Watching it, I'm like, what is his father doing on the floor? Listening to Giannis, I'm like, wow, what a response. Because Giannis is thoughtful, he's self-aware, all of those things. And then when listening to Shaq, I'm like, you know what? The best reaction from Giannis would have been, we lost, congratulations to them, and let everybody else fight that battle, because those players do deal with a lot more than that. The father shouldn't have been on the floor. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think I ended up having the same reaction you did after listening to Shaq last night, which is they deal with a lot, and I know Giannis was emotional and he's sharing his thoughts, almost stream of conscious, in that moment. But it's like, let everybody else fight that and ensure that the father never is on the floor again in that situation. By the way, for those that, again, haven't followed this, the father apologized on social media. The son, Tyrese Halliburton, apologized on behalf of his father, etc. But anyway, that was the situation last night. They're not going to kick him out of games moving forward, do you think?
No. And the other thing is, there's a code of conduct in the sense of having it even. It's interesting listening to that clip from the show because they're yelling over each other.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
On the show. And it's crazy because we sit in there together for hours. So I truly get to understand what they're trying to say. And all of them have good points, and none of them really got it across in that clip he played. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, Chuck is right. Like, hey, this guy's always on the court, right? But Shaq is wrong in the sense of Tyrese Halliburton's dad not saying anything. Like, Tyrese Halliburton's dad cursed at Giannis. Giannis is standing there not reacting, and then he's like, hold on. You guys, this is too much. Like, what are you doing here? And then he says, like, my dad's not with me anymore. He wouldn't do this. I was not brought up this way. So you can see the anger. The other part that needs to be understood is when you play the clip of Giannis talking about the incident is right after he was asked, are you leaving Milwaukee? Right? And the fact that he was non-committal, the fact that at the trade deadline, had privilege to understand that, like, he's probably gone, and that they asked him that first. And he's sitting there like, is this really happening? Like, think about how incredible he played in this series, in this game, and to think like this might be his last game in a Bucks uniform.
Yeah, I know.
A guy that is arguably the first or second best player in franchise history.
We're talking to Chris Miles. Would you say the first is Lou Alcindor before he became Kareem?
Yeah, those are the two names, right? It's one of those two, right. And really Giannis has done more with the franchise, but I don't know if it's like Oscar Robertson. It's like Lou Alcindor, Giannis, Oscar Robertson, whatever you want to do with that. But I would say, that's the combo.
Yeah. After that, I don't know. Sidney Moncrief. I don't know. We can go down the list. All right. Let's move on because let's move on to that. So I am curious. What are the teams that people are talking about for Giannis?
So here's what I would say, and this is where it gets difficult for me in confidential information and things I can and cannot say, right? And I will say this. I know the Miami Heat have been a suitor. I don't know how much has been reported, but I would imagine that would be his priority destination and mutual interest. And I think they have been aligning themselves to make that happen. That is the first part. The second part is if Giannis is on the open market, like if this is a Luka Doncic deal, which like, oh, here, you're gone, right? Like, okay, Miami's it. That's where he wants to go. That's what it's going to be, right? But I think on the flip side of that, if it's an open market, then we have to have more logical conversations. Like the San Antonio Spurs have the assets, the cap to absorb for Milwaukee and their ownership to like save money and also rebuild. You got two. Once the draft lottery hits on May 12th, you got two potential high lottery picks coming in for San Antonio to go along with all of these assets of guys that like they got too many guys and not enough stars, right? It's like Victor Wembanyama, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle would be the three guys that they're not going to move. Then everything else Milwaukee could be interested in. I mean, they got a lot of pieces. So I do wonder if that becomes a pairing like Giannis and San Antonio, how incredible that would be for Giannis, for the NBA, and really changing the landscape of things. And then the Houston Rockets. I mean, they have a ton of assets that really don't fit. And now the narrative with them is they need a bona fide star. And Ime Udoka is the Giannis type of coach. Like these are things that I think those are the logical destinations when you look at assets and, Giannis in fitting, but I do think he played his last game as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, I kind of assumed that at the trade deadline. I was like, okay, well, if the Bucks make a long run, maybe that's not the case. Going out in the first round, 3 consecutive years, playing the way that he's playing, I think this is the summer he needs.
We're talking to Chris Miles from NBA TV. I'm going to save my wild thought about if the Wizards end up with a poor draft lottery selection and they're not in the Cooper Flag or the Dylan Harper sweepstakes, about just, scratching the plan right now and bringing in Durant and Giannis and just going for it next year. We can talk about that down the road. All right. The NBA has been phenomenal here over the last couple of days. I want to go to late last night and what Denver did to the Clippers, after the incredible ending on Saturday. They're up 3-2. This is the team that I've actually got a rooting interest in. I'm just a huge Kawhi Leonard guy and have been forever. James Harden's been terrible so far in this series. He was terrible again last night, defensively, offensively. Why is it that Harden this time of year, especially when a series gets late in a series, there have been some moments in his career, but his playoff legacy is not a good one, and I don't think he's adding to it right now. What do you think?
I think it's a different style of basketball in the postseason. And as talented as he is, Kawhi Leonard is built for the playoffs. Giannis is built for the playoffs. Joker, Jamal Murray, if you look at their games, they trim that there's no fat on their games. James Harden's game is like a juicy steak, but if you're trying to lean up, it's just not the right fit for the playoffs, the way that you have to play basketball. And I think we see that a lot with players who can put up regular season numbers. And I think James Harden is a first ballot Hall of Famer, phenomenal basketball player. But when you watch him, it's like, all right, how many dribbles is it going to take right now?
Oh my
how long
God.
is he going to have possession of the ball? Like these, I mean, and that's a regular season game. And I think, look, the last 3 years, the NBA has changed so much that a guy like Donovan Mitchell has adjusted. He used to dribble way more. I'm sure there's an advanced stat on that where even in the regular season this year, that was taken out of the game a bit, and James Harden has dialed it back. But in the playoffs, everyone is dialed in. The teams you're facing, everyone can play defense and are hustling as hard as they can. And that's what it is. I mean, it's not like,
yeah.
I think this is the caliber player he is when we get to this. Like, he's really, really good. But I think playoff James Harden, when I look at the all-time greats, is how I view him.
Look, I'm going to compare him to a player who was in the finals last year. And this player is younger and is going to be considered one of the all-time great scorers and shot makers. But there were 14 possessions in the game on Sunday in Minnesota where the only player on Los Angeles's team that touched the ball from the moment it was inbounded in the backcourt was Luka Doncic. And sometimes it's the same thing with Harden. The ball just sticks, and this time of year, it's tough. Even when they make tough shots or make really good plays, I just don't think it's sustainable 4 out of 7 in 4 straight series.
Well, I mean, people thought I was an insane person because, look, if there's a team in which I have a lot of contacts, it's the Dallas Mavericks. And you can go look it up or, Google search it and see my interviews with Luka.
I trust you.
But it's like one of those things where I'll tell you this. When they made that run to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago, we went down to Dallas for a real training camp, right? So it's like the preseason and, we're basically doing a glorified practice is what we do as a show, right? And we highlight the players. And there was this air of, we are tired of him. That was it, right? And not from players and coaches, from people who work on the staff. And what I mean is, like, when you walk into the practice facility, there's a 60-year-old guy that's like, oh, everybody hates this guy. And they're like, wait, all these people that have worked here for 20, 25 years hate Luka Doncic, who is like the guy bringing all the money in. So when I started to hear that and understand that, and I watched him complain to the refs and turn the ball over, and then being, covering the finals last year. Game 3, I'll take you behind the curtain a bit. The game ends, and, I always hear terrible stuff about Kyrie Irving as, like, his personality, right? I'm trying to explain to people that, they lost Game 3. Kyrie had his best game of the series after 2 bad games, and it's like finals is over, you're down 3-0, right? And I see Luka, and I'm like, oh, let me give Luka his space. He's going with his people. And I kind of noticed Luka is not talking to his teammates, right? He's just off, getting in his car, gone. No problem with that at all. But then I see Kyrie with his kids and his wife, right? He's walking over and he's with 2 or 3 teammates. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, Kyrie's with a group of teammates and they're talking about what just happened, right? And I see him and I'm like, I should not disturb him right now. He interrupts his own path. He comes over. Hey, Chris. I'm like, oh, hey, Kyrie. He's like, I'm like, tough one. He's like, yeah, hopefully we can get the next one. And he has this like positive, upbeat personality, and he's bringing it to his teammates. And for me, when I think of the Luka Doncic experience, and I watch him yell at Dorian Finney-Smith at half court after he turns the ball over, right? And, and anyone that's ever played basketball, if you coached an 8th grader, you say, don't put the ball where the any line or the out of bounds can become a defender and then call for a pick. Right. Like, what are you doing, right? And then he yells at Dorian Finney-Smith, who's not the greatest screen setter. He's a 3-and-D guy. So I just think, the Lakers are going to build around Luka. It's going to take a year or 2, but you can't have Luka and LeBron when you got a maniac like Anthony Edwards out there who wants to take your crown.
Yeah. Interesting stuff on Luka Doncic with Chris Miles. All right, I've taken up too much of your time, but just let's go real quickly. Houston Golden State. What an incredible first 4 games, as physical as any of the series that have been played. Do you give Houston any chance of coming back?
No, I think I had Houston winning that series, right? But no, they can't come back for this reason alone. Experience. You got 3 guys who are feeling like it's their last dance, and Draymond Green, Steph Curry, and Jimmy Butler, right? Like, I know they have contracts that extend past this year, but if you look at how they're playing, this in their mind is their last dance. And when I listened to what Jalen Green had to say after he scored his 38 points in game 2, right?
Yeah, the only
it was this like
for him.
But there's a reason. He goes, yes, I had the jitters. Yes, there was nervousness in that first home game. Then he felt comfortable a second playoff home game. Then they hit the road, and it's back to, what's going on here? And I think that's permeating throughout the team. Alperen Şengün, yes, he's playing well, but there's still a sense of like, okay, feeling it out. Amen Thompson doesn't look like how good that he is. I think that this is we made the playoffs here. This is what it feels like. So we're going to go back to the lab. We're going to tweak the roster a little bit. And then next year, watch out for us. That's just what I feel on Houston now that we saw them. I mean, you never know how these players are going to react in their first playoff game. But now that we've seen it, it's like, okay, they're done. They're not going to beat Steph Curry unless Steph Curry is hurt early in, the closeout game. But, that's what it is. The Warriors are going to move on past the Rockets, even though I did have the Rockets beating Golden State.
It's funny, Chris, watching that series. Like, I've watched all 4 games, and I'm like, man, Houston is actually in many ways the team that's more dangerous and even better. But it's just that Steph didn't let them lose game 3 when Butler wasn't there. Jimmy didn't let them lose game 4 when it hung in the balance. And I just think you're right on the experience. What'll be really interesting is a Golden State Minnesota series, because I think we're going to get that. I'm assuming you think Minnesota will close out the Lakers at some point, even if it's not tonight.
Oh yeah, and yeah. Yes. I mean, look, I think people are starting to get it, but Anthony Edwards' conditioning and his work ethic. I mean, people don't really understand. And I get all the people hear the off the court stuff and be like, "Oh, it's Ja Morant again." No. Ja Morant drinks alcohol. We've seen him with the tequila shot. Anthony Edwards doesn't drink alcohol. He doesn't do I don't think people understand that when he says he doesn't want to be the face of the league. Like, we had that interview with him at All-Star.
Yeah. And
that had already come out. And I can send you the clip. I asked him it 4 times in the interview. He's like, no, I want to play basketball. Like, I don't want to do these other, and that's because he really wants to go to the gym, watch basketball, talk about football, talk about basketball, and all of these other things in his brain, they're a distraction. Oh, you guys want me to be the face of the league so that you can, take me away from basketball. But that's how his brain operates. So I think some of the things that he said has been almost taken the wrong way. But if you really listen to what he's saying, you kind of realize this is a 23-year-old kid that really wants to play basketball. And is not as caught up in the lifestyle as some of his peers and predecessors as we think because of, the other breaking news.
All right, I got to run. I took you too much of your time, and I'm way past my break. I could sit here and do this with you for another hour, though. But just give me real quickly, finals matchup, who wins?
Man, I have no idea, right? And I do.
Well, it's going to be Boston, isn't it?
All season. No, I don't know that.
You like
certain.
Cleveland?
I don't. I'm saying I watched Cleveland and I'm like, man, they punched Miami in the mouth and took their willpower where Miami's like, why are we here now? Right. And when I look at the depth of both rosters, here's what the players tell me, and this is what's important. Cleveland's backcourt is still too small, and the series against Boston, that's going to be the determining factor. And I'm like, okay. But Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, if they play that way, then, Mobley looked that one game that Cleveland beat Boston last year in the playoffs. Mobley was incredible. And he has that in his mind, if I play this way, we win. So I don't know. Yeah. And I think that's going to be, I'm just excited for that series. They're going to face OKC though. OKC's coming out.
All right. let's see if they've got the experience to match up with the Warriors when they get there. I'd like to see that. Although I think the next series will be tough for OKC too. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it as always. Good stuff.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Yep.
Chris Miles, everybody. Kevin Sheehan Show. The Team 980, theteam980.com. When we come back, I'll tell you something that I forgot to say during the Shadur Sanders situation that I think is beneficial for him. Next. Barry's Verluga will join us at 12. The council has to get 7 votes to pass what was discussed Monday very joyously in sort of a celebratory manner. Could it be headed towards what happened with Ted and Governor Youngkin and their, incredible press conference when they announced they were moving to Virginia? I mean, there were tears in that press conference, and turned out that it was just a bit premature. Barry wrote about it in the Post. He'll join us at 12. I wanted to say something about Shadur Sanders because we had a conversation about him in the first hour, and many of you called in. I actually think that Cleveland is one of those teams that is a good team for him to go to. Kevin Stefanski's good with quarterbacks, and the style of quarterback that he likes to coach is the style of quarterback that Shadur Sanders is. There is more under center stuff, no doubt. And a lot of college quarterbacks come into the NFL and they're not as comfortable under center. But it's lots of run game, zone run game, boot off that zone run game, play action. That's where I could see Shadur Sanders having some success. You get a running game going. They drafted Quinshon Judkins. They don't have Nick Chubb anymore. They also drafted the kid from Tennessee, Dylan Sampson. So you've got some backs there. You've got, the receiver situation is a little sketchy. It's like Jerry Jeudy, and I forget who else they have. It's not much. Their defense could be awesome. There's no doubt about that with, bringing Myles Garrett back and some of the other players they have, Owusu Koromoa, et cetera. But I think Stefanski's the right guy. Like, if it doesn't work with him and that style of offense, that will be a major red flag, because that's the kind of offense he should be in. Quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins, like Joe Flacco when he took the Browns to the playoffs 2 years ago. The run game, balanced attack, play action, bootleg off of the run game. That's where Shadur's got a chance to succeed. And they do have a good defense. They drafted, the kid from Michigan, Graham. They drafted Schlesinger from UCLA in the second round. They've got, Delpit. They've got Denzel Ward. They've got Myles Garrett, obviously, Owusu Koromoa. They'll be good defensively. They have the lowest over-under number in the league, by the way, at 4.5. The lowest over-under number in the league. But I think that's the right fit for Shadur Sanders. I mean, Kevin O'Connell offense, Sean McVay, those the Shanahan style coaches where they protect the quarterback with the run game and with the play action and boot game and make it easier for them. Rather than just playing pure drop back. I don't think that's what Shadur Sanders is. And Shadur Sanders isn't a dual threat quarterback. He's much more of a pocket quarterback, old school, stylistically. Now, will he be able to do the mental stuff that you have to be able to do, at that position in terms of processing quickly and being able to throw with anticipation? Because that's something that some of the quarterbacks that Stefanski's had that he's been successful with, that's what they had. They threw with great anticipation. They saw it pre-snap. They knew what was going on post-snap. Some of that is just experience. But I actually think the fit for Shadur Sanders is a good one. Not to mention, there's no obvious starting quarterback. Deshaun Watson's career is probably over. Like, he's not going to be healthy enough to play in this upcoming season, certainly not at the beginning of it. No one thinks Kenny Pickett is a true starting quarterback in the league. Dylan Gabriel's 5'9". Right now the favorite's probably old Joe Flacco, to be the starter at 40 years old in Cleveland, as he was at the end of 2023 when he came in and he resurrected that season and got him to the playoffs. But there, we're talking about an opportunity if Shadur is a good fit for that offense, and I think he is with Stefanski. It's not a bad spot for him, in terms of having a chance to play, right system and chance. Now, maybe you'd say it'd be better if he'd gone to a place where, like Matt Stafford, where he could sit behind Matt Stafford for a year or two and learn with Sean McVay as the coach. Yeah, but they didn't want him. I think they were going to take Jackson Dart had the Giants not traded in front of him. All right. Fred Smoot next hour with his thoughts. We had a nice conversation the other day about the draft. We went through all 5 Washington players, and you'll get a sense as to what Fred thought. Barry's Verluga coming up. When we come back, though, the Giants' first pick overall is creating some tension in the Big Apple. I'll explain when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. By the way, if you've never been to a rugby match, this is the one to check out. Old Glory DC. They're bringing serious intensity, talking big hits, fast breaks, nonstop action. Trust me, it's the real deal. These guys are flying all over the field. The hits are loud. The energy in the stands is awesome from start to finish. This Sunday, Old Glory is back home at the Maryland Soccerplex. They're taking on the Utah Warriors. Kickoff's 2 p.m., and it's Kids Day. So bring the whole family. There are inflatables, face painting, games, post-game autographs with the players. It's an incredible experience for the kids and their parents. The weather's supposed to be beautiful, sunny, and in the 60s, and you've got the perfect setup for an incredible Sunday outside. Now, whether you're a longtime rugby fan or you're new to the game and you're just looking for something different and exciting, I would give this a shot. The hits are real. The action never stops. The crowd makes it feel like a party from the moment you walk in. Yeah, rugby games have always been parties. I know. I went to several of them, and Maryland's rugby club team was great back in the day. I don't know if they're still good. Get your tickets for Sunday now at oldglorydc.com. That's oldglorydc.com. Great rugby, great weather, and a great time for the whole family. Old Glory DC. Let's scrum together.
All right, last night, the Nats losing on a wild pitch after taking the lead in the 9th. Bryson Stott came home to score. The Nats lose 7-6. They'll continue their series tonight. Pregame at 6:15 right here on the Team 980. The NFL has fined the Atlanta Falcons $250,000 and defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich $100,000 for failing to prevent the disclosure of confidential information distributed to the club in advance of the NFL draft. Jack Ulbrich initiated a prank call to Shadur Sanders on day 2 of the NFL draft. Jeff Ulbrich fined $100,000. The Washington Capitals look to close out their series against the Montreal Canadiens. Alex Ovechkin was not on the ice yesterday. He was on the ice this morning for a morning skate. Logan Thompson was the first off the ice. He will get the start. Taylor Radish was skating with the scratches. Alexei Protas will draw in. Pre-game begins at 6:45 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
So, did you see this story from New York? Abdul Carter was the Giants' first pick in the draft, number 3 overall. Big-time pass rusher out of Penn State, wore number 11 at Penn State. Many people think he could become the next Micah Parsons. Abdul Carter wanted to wear number 56 playing with the Giants. He apparently wanted to get Lawrence Taylor to clear it with the team that he wanted to sort of honor Lawrence Taylor by wearing number 56 and being a Giant. And Lawrence Taylor politely said no. They ended up talking, and they had a conversation, according to ESPN, and Taylor told Abdul Carter he has to be the player that he is. He can't be another Lawrence Taylor. Well, he may be better than a Lawrence Taylor. Who knows? But he has to make his own mark. It's up to him. So the team backed Lawrence Taylor on this. Look, these are young players. They may not understand the history of the league. They may not understand the history of the team that they're going to. It'd be nice if they had people around him to say, don't do that. Because as Bill Belichick once said, we're talking about Lawrence Taylor now. We're talking about LT. Lawrence Taylor is the greatest football player, pound for pound, in my lifetime of watching football. I don't know if it's that close. I guess there's some quarterbacks and Jerry Rice, in the conversation, but I've always felt this way. 56 LT is, in my lifetime, going back to the 70s and beyond, is the greatest player I've ever watched. I'm talking about period, football player, not defense. Defense, offense, period. So this is LT we're talking about here. Look, it was not a very pleasant situation, and I bashed Dan Snyder and the team for putting Joe Theismann on the spot when Dwayne Haskins wanted to wear number 7. And, that should have been immediately squashed by the team. No, that's Joe Theismann we're talking about. He was the quarterback for the team that won the first Super Bowl for this franchise in the club's history. You've got to make your own mark, and you got to prove it, on the field. God rest his soul in Dwayne Haskins. That was just a horrendous decision. And they put Joe into a position which was really difficult for him. And Joe actually, came on this show and said, it'd be nice if he found a number to try to make his own mark with that number. But that's not what, our dumb owner wanted at the time. That was the kid that went to high school with his son. That was his pick. And if he wanted to wear number 7, he was going to wear number 7. Fortunately, the Giants were not going to, override LT's answer. I don't really, it's one of those situations where it's like, God, Abdul Carter is going to be a really good player. No doubt about that. And he's young, and he may not know. And maybe the people around him don't know, I'm not necessarily blaming him or saying, oh my God, what is he doing? Because he may not just have known. He heard about how great Lawrence Taylor was. It's a long time ago now, and just said, he's one of the greatest players. No, he is the greatest player in that franchise's history. LT is the greatest player of in most of your lifetime of watching football. Nobody changed the game like he did. Nobody did. He was an all-pro first team 9 times. He made all-pro first or second team every year of his career until his career started to wind down in the last 2 or 3 years of his career. He's the last player to have won the defensive MVP, and he's one of only 2 players in the history of the game to win MVP as a defensive player. Alan Page is the other one. Yeah, we're talking about LT here. The answer is absolutely no. I'm not a Giant fan. I can't speak for Giant fans, but I bet you this is one of those things where they're like, absolutely no, everybody's in agreement. I didn't want Haskins to wear number 7. I thought that was incredibly outrageous. And by the way, we love Joe T, and he's the quarterback in many ways of my youth. And he's a Lombardi Trophy winning quarterback, the first in franchise history. But Joe's not LT. Joe's not the player that LT was as a quarterback. He's a great player in the history of our organization, and his jersey deserved to be protected in that particular situation. But my God, Lawrence Taylor, stop. I mean, for us, it would be somebody coming in as a corner saying they want to wear number 28. No, you're not doing that. Now it's retired. LT's is retired as well. Abdul Carter might be a great player, and the response, is he's not going to wear 56. I don't know what number he's going to choose to wear. But Taylor handled it in the right way. He said no, but he called for a get-together with Abdul Carter so he could explain, why that number shouldn't be given to any other player, but with no ill intent, with no condescent, not being condescending. And he said, the guy's a great player. I just talked to him, and he seems like a good guy, and he should make his own mark with his own number. And I guess the Mara family, Joe Shane and company, have LT's back. Yeah, 56 for the Giants should never be worn by anybody that ever plays for them again. He's the best all time, and we know it in this city. All right, Barry's Verluga next with where the city council is on the vote on bringing Washington back to RFK. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also now streaming live on our YouTube 980 page. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button when you get there. Barry's Verluga's column in the Post titled, "After That Commanders Pep Rally, It's Time for DC to Get a Better Deal," starts. Let's take a deep breath and acknowledge a truth about the events of the week. Holding a celebratory welcome home news conference for an NFL team complete with legends from the franchise's decorated past, the best way to stir emotions, is at best premature and at worst disrespectful to the citizens who are going to be footing the bill. No, not all of the bill, but not nothing either. Barry joins us right now. Of course, you can follow Barry at the Post and on X at Barry's Verluga, SVRLUGA, where he has a link to the column that he wrote. So, it really did feel Monday like almost a repeat of the Youngkin Ted announcement. Different, a different context. One team was leaving the city, the other one's coming back. And I think this one perhaps feels maybe closer than that one did. But how close are they? Where is the city council now? And what do they have to do to get a deal worthy of voting yes on it?
So I think, Kevin, my problem with it was, and your reference to the Leonsis Youngkin Virginia deal is exactly right. Like, it shouldn't have been presented as a finality. It shouldn't have been presented as they are coming home. It should have been presented as the mayor's office and the team have worked hard to come out with a deal that they think is fair for both sides. And let's talk about it with the city, and let's talk about it with the council. And we all have work to do here. Let's make sure we're moving forward and everybody's informed. And I think the reason I think it was, kind of borderline offensive is that it seemed to me to be playing with hearts and minds of, like, let's stir all the emotions of how great everybody feels about the RFK site and what happened at the RFK site back in the day, and push the train further down the tracks than it actually was. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think that the stadium's going to get built there. I think it's going to get built there. And I think the council's job now is not to block it necessarily, but it is to work to get the city in better position than it is now. And I think $2.7 billion from Josh Harris is a number that got a lot of people's attention as being very generous from an owner. But don't let that overshadow that the $1 billion at least that the district is going to have to contribute would be the second highest amount of public money for a stadium, an NFL stadium, since 2009, trailing only the Titans project that's going on in Nashville. So I don't want to just throw water on what was kind of an emotional, fun day, and the idea of playing there is really cool. But I do think that as someone who lives in the district, it's really easy for Commanders fans in Virginia and Maryland to say, that sounds awesome, let's do it, and they're not paying for it.
It's interesting. The first thing that you said, look, what they did on Monday generated a lot of positive passion from most of the fans, if not all of them. Whereas the Ted Youngkin presser actually backfired. They didn't read the room well, because the fan base, for the most part, and a lot of DC residents didn't want to see them leave. Now, first of all, do you have an idea as to where the council is? There are 12 current members, Ward 8's vacant. They need 7 yes votes. Do you know how many yes votes they have as of now?
We've had other people, obviously people who cover city government, trying to sniff that out. There were 4 members who were at the press conference who can be considered safe yeses. And my understanding is there's then a group that is more of a hard no, or perceived to be a hard no, with the current deal, and that would be including Charles Allen, who I've talked to, whose district is very near to the stadium, Ward 6. Right. And then there's a group that could be swayed either way. My guess is, and they've got to fill the 13th seat, so that's an unknown. But I don't think it's going to be that difficult to get to 7 if there is negotiating room on the deal that's on the table. I don't think that it's going to go through as is. And if you remember, Kevin, I referenced this in the column, 20 years ago in the fall of 2004, Major League Baseball and Anthony Williams, the then mayor, announced that the Montreal Expos were moving to DC in a similarly, with similar finality. And that December, the council basically blew up the deal and got a new one, got one that was better for the city. So I think something similar could happen here where, maybe the city finds some revenue streams there that are not in this deal. Maybe they find some funding for other projects. I would be shocked if the deal that was the term sheet that was agreed to by the mayor and the team just goes in word for word as it is, because the council's job is to improve it and make sure that their citizens are getting more out of it.
So that's where I wanted to go to next. Barry's Verluga joining us, because I pulled up the term sheet very early this morning because it's available out there, and I'm a DC resident too. So I'm interested in sort of what this is going to mean to me, but overarching for me is I want the stadium, and I think ultimately the revenue and the tax, revenue, et cetera, will be a good thing. But I haven't read through the term sheet in great detail. I'm wondering if you have a sense of where the negotiating areas are. Where are they going to haggle this down from $1.1 billion in terms of the city's commitment to something much less? Or maybe that's not even the big part of, the negotiation possibility. What is it that Mendelsohn and company are going to go after to make this deal that will eventually pass? It sounds like you believe it will. I do too. Look different than it looks today.
I think, there's a number of different areas, and it's not all necessarily bringing the $1 billion contribution down. Some of it can be about, well, how is this land being used? Are we really going to build 8,000 parking spaces that are only going to be used, and we can debate how many times this facility will be used, but say 30 times a year, which is a pretty aggressive number. Are we going to blight the area with parking garages, or is there a way to expand metro access and public transportation access and use less of the land for parking garages that sit there, kind of empty and vacant for most of the time, and blight the landscape a little bit? Is there a way that, Charles Allen's reading of this is that the district will own the parking garages, but will get none of the revenue from it, that the commanders will get all the revenue. Could we sway that? Is there a way to tip a revenue share with that? I think that's part of it, Kevin. I'm not against development, because if you drive by RFK Stadium, it looks terrible. It looks awful. That is wasted land, and this is a major, major, major opportunity. But the development should benefit the district and its residents too, not just the Harris Group, which is going to have a huge tract to the west of the stadium between the metro exit and the stadium to develop their businesses, restaurant, bars. It's something like maybe 90 different businesses that would be planned there that will all go to them. What can the district get out of that other than just tax revenue at a time when the federal workforce is hemorrhaging people, and the district's bond rating has been docked and lowered, which makes it more difficult to borrow? The mayor is saying this isn't about the fiscal year 2025 budget, and I agree with that, but you aren't operating in a financial vacuum either. There are realities, and we don't know how these realities are going to play out for the financial health of the city over time. That all has to be considered.
Don't you feel, and I actually mentioned this on Monday after listening to this and initially getting some of the council reaction to this is a term sheet. This is not a final, agreed upon contract between the city and the team. Don't you think Josh Harris and company understand that they're going to have to be a little bit flexible here, that this was perhaps the most that they could ask for, but there is room to move back off of what's in that term sheet currently?
I would hope so. I think that's a very realistic viewpoint when you have to know that the mayor is not a dictator and she cannot just present her plan as one and done, when you know that it has to get approved by the council. And the team has met with council members that it knew would be or could be opposed to this plan, not in negotiating, but to get to know them and hear their concerns about it. I think they have. I don't know that they're realistic about it. I would be surprised, given that they seem to read the room pretty well on every decision that they've made, that they wouldn't understand that this is a starting point and it's not done yet. And and that, Kevin, really is my opposition to any of this is going back to presenting it as done when it's clearly not done. Like, I just think there was a better, the pep rally with Joe Gibbs and Darryl Green and Doug Williams and all of that should have been when the council passes it and it's actually done. Not there's a cart before the horse thing here that bothered me.
Yeah, well, that's part of them actually recognizing public reaction, at least the majority of it, which could ultimately lead to pressure on city council members versus the other one in which they completely misjudged what the reaction from the public would be, talking about the Wizards, Caps, Ted, and the move to Virginia. A couple of quick things. Number one, how much palm greasing goes on between now and the vote on something like this?
It's got to be a lot, but it also, I mean, my hope, again, as a district resident, would be it's not just greased palms. It's like substantive improvements on the deal for district residents. Like that is, and again, does something have to happen to that area? Like that is, cities don't have that much land to develop anymore. It's all been developed. And so in that sense, getting control of the land from the federal government was such a gift. I just want to make sure that the gift is the right gift. And I don't think that people should be, kind of bamboozled or blinded by the $2.7 billion that Harris is putting in. He's putting that in not as a gift, as an investment to his product that he's going to make money off of. That's not a crime either, but let's not look at it as charity. It's like you spend money to start a business, to build a facility for your business. Like that's an investment that you're going to reap benefits from. Yes, the city will reap benefits from it because we all know, if you're a sports fan, you like when the football team has a great place to play. It's a unifying thing. I only know the tales from what it was like at RFK when the Redskins were good. I'd like to feel that in a situation where you're not driving to PG County where it's nothing against PG County, that the area around that was just, there's nothing to do. There's no place to go get a drink or a meal afterwards. Like you're going there for the game and you're coming back. Like what would the experience be like when you're walking through an actual neighborhood and there's stuff to do and it's been activated? Like what has to happen now is just maxing out what the district benefits are. And that's not all financial. That's residential. That's land use, not making it just a sea of parking garages. So I think there's just tons of work to be done. I wish that work had been acknowledged on Monday.
Is it clear that this will be a domed or roofed, as they've said, stadium? Like this is not going to be a retractable roof situation, right? It's
in the term sheet that it's a roofed stadium. Yep. It does not say anything about retractable, and retractable, my understanding is just adds a huge amount of money there. And you could wish that you were going to an NFL game on a Sunday on October when it's a perfect day out, and you were going to it outside. Like I prefer that to a dome stadium. But I mean, go to the place in Minneapolis, which is maybe the best football stadium I've been to and bouncing around in the NFL. Like the Vikings used to be about like, well, we play in the elements and Bud Grant is our coach and we don't have heaters on the sidelines. No. That stadium is awesome and it's loud and the Vikings have a clear home advantage. And guess what? It has hosted the Final Four. This obviously puts Washington, D.C. in the mix for stuff that we haven't been candidates to host here. I mean, I think it's a shame that there's a domestic World Cup next year and Washington, the nation's capital, which should be a candidate to host the final of the thing, couldn't be considered because the facilities were so lousy. Yeah. So that this would change all of that, and that's all positive. I mean, I love sports, and I would love to be in a city that can host the biggest and best events, including, of course, the Super Bowl. But let's just start the work now, not act like it's finished.
Yeah, and I think a Super Bowl would be very much in play. We're talking to Barry's Verluga. One thing that was told to me, and I'm just curious if you've heard the same thing, is that some of the council members are upset that the team isn't going to relocate, and because of, potential jobs, et cetera. Now that, this is not a massive employer because most of their employees are players, but has that been an issue? And do you think the team could potentially relocate as part of, a renegotiation?
I should have mentioned that as something that could be part of the negotiation, because right now they have obviously their training facility, football headquarters in Ashburn, and asking to relocate that would cause, you need a practice bubble for indoors, you need outdoor fields. That would take up a substantial part of that land. But again, Charles Allen told me he was really ticked off that they're saying they're going to keep the facility in Ashburn. This is the one that you could argue should be relocated, is they moved their business operations to College Park under Jason Wright a couple, within the last 2 years. There's no reason they couldn't move those to offices in the stadium or into an adjacent facility. And really, you say most of the employees are players. It's actually, there's a few hundred employees, full-time employees of any NFL franchise that get in all sorts of, ticketing jobs, business side jobs, media jobs. Like it's not nothing. It's not a game changer for the district, but I do think there's something symbolic about you say you're the Washington Commanders, be headquartered in Washington. Monumental Sports is headquartered downtown. Yes, the Capitals facility is in Arlington, but they have offices downtown, and the Nats are obviously at Nationals Park. If it says Washington in front of your name, why don't you put your employees in Washington?
All right, real quickly before I let you run. Caps tonight, game 5, with a chance to end that series. By the way, Carolina ended their series with New Jersey last night in double overtime, winning that series 4-1, so they await the winner of this series. But to someone who hasn't seen any of the 4 games, if you were talking to that person, how would you describe the series so far, and then what happens? Do they end it tonight or not?
I would say that at 3-1, it looks like the better team is ahead, but each of these games has been really tightly contested. And the one that was decided by the most was actually the one game that the Canadians won. So I think that the Capitals are the better team from top to bottom. They're better defensively. They probably get Alexei Protas back tonight, which is huge for a penalty kill that has been struggling against a dangerous Montreal power play. And I think it's imperative, if the Caps lose tonight, are they still up in the series? They are. But if they lose tonight, or even if they get down early, you're giving Montreal hope. And I think the job tonight is to extinguish hope and to do what the Hurricanes did in weird fashion. They were down 3-0 in that game and had to come back and push it to overtime and win it in double OT. But getting up early, holding a lead into the second period, wearing them down physically, because Washington is a bigger, stronger, more physical team. I think it's really important that they close it out in 5, because you just start to think bad thoughts. If you go back to Montreal, they have that crazy atmosphere. And then
we would start thinking that because of the history of Game 7s lost and 3-1 leads lost. I wonder if the players on this team would feel it. But you're right. If they lose tonight and they go back and lose Game 6, all the pressure would be on Washington in a 7th and deciding game. I got to run. I appreciate you doing this, as always. Good story this morning. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of months. Thanks, Barry.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Anytime.
Barry's Verluga, everybody. You'll hear Fred Smoot's thoughts on Washington's draft next.
With the 45th selection, the Redskins have chosen defensive back from Mississippi State, Fred Smoot.
Yeah, Smoot was supposed to be in that 2001 draft, a first-round pick. But there was a big old party in Starkville a few weeks earlier, and the league was looking into Fred's role in it. He ended up going in the second round to Washington and Marty Schottenheimer, who was making the picks that particular year. Smoot joined me the other day on my podcast to talk draft. Here's how it went. Overall, before we get to a couple of these players, what did you think?
I loved it. Like, listen, because I have been very intrigued in studying Adam Peters and the way he do things. And I didn't look at this draft and worry about what players we got because he did such a masterful job in free agency. All right, so let's supplement what we really got in this draft. We really got Laramie Tunsil, an all-pro left tackle with a third-round pick. We got Debo Samuels with a fourth-round pick. We got a left tackle, a right tackle that can play left. That's one of the best, if not the most athletic, Connolly is tackle in this draft. Used to play running back in junior high school and high school. This dude is look up his athletic numbers. They blow you through the roof.
Yeah.
Then you still Trey Amos, who had a first round grade. You talking about me having a first round grade in 01? The same thing you getting from Trey Amos, and you stuff in another room. Like you stuff in another room to the max of competition. Let me take you down this offensive line, Professor, and I'm going to tell you what the future holds. Last time we won a Super Bowl, we had the Hogs. Right now, we're getting the Wild Boys together. And this is what we got as of today. We have a Pro Bowl left tackle. We have a Pro Bowl center. Tim Cosme, when he's healthy, is a Pro Bowl guard. What I seen from our guy last year that we drafted, he now moving to guard becomes a asset that can, now his ceiling and his floor goes through the roof. So that means 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen have Pro Bowl capabilities. That itself sets you up for success. I've been screaming since I've been playing football here. If you don't have the fat boys that smell like bacon to dominate, we will never dominate consistently. Right now, we are suiting up for trench warfare, and that's not sexy to people. And I don't need it to be sexy to people, because when you do sexy picks, that means you're probably a losing organization. You know what was a sexy pick? Cam Ward was a sexy pick to a losing organization. Winning teams always go offensive linemen. Kansas City, you see the Ravens, how they draft. They don't draft for need, because if you draft for need, you're already behind. You drafting best player available because you have that option that gives you power.
By the way, when you were talking about Tunsil for the picks and Debo for the picks, you left out Marshawn Lattimore for, you know.
Yes. So you got a Pro Bowl corner also. So what he's been doing to people, I would hate to throw the word fleecing out there, but, you know, we got fleeced for Trent Williams years ago, and this guy was in that room also. So fleecing is something he knows about.
Yeah, they got 3 players with our 3rd, 4th, and 6th round picks. All right. So before we get to some more specifics about the players that you just, went through, who did you want them to take when they were on the clock at 29? I know you trust Adam Peters, but you were screaming for somebody. Who was it?
Well, I was screaming for Ezerique from Donovan Ezerique from
Boston College. Ezerique from Boston College. Okay, yeah.
I liked him, but I was really more fascinated with James Pierce Jr.
Okay.
Because if you get an edge, he remind me of the freak. He remind me. You got a guy that big running a 4.40. I can find a place for you on my roster. All right? Like, I can figure something out. And now that we got the right locker room, now we can take these chances. So I was high on him. But
what I love about Peters, he went the opposite direction, and he went offensive tackle because he realized, think about the guys we got to block. He's over there paired up with Michael Parsons now. Then we got to realize we still got Philadelphia in the defensive line. They got with Jalen Doomsday Carter. We also got the New York Giants and everything they just did with Abdul Carter. They got Thibodeau. They got Dexter Lawrence. Like, so he said, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Burns, like you talking about pass rushing galore. So we had to, we went and we did it on the offense side of the ball. So I was all with it. When I seen the draft pick, then I went, really looked at that kid and realized this kid just doesn't get beat. And when he gets beat, his lateral movement is ridiculous. Like he can get anywhere on the spot on the field he wants to get.
All right. Tell me about Trey Amos.
Trey Amos, long, great ball skills, willing to stick his head in there and tackle. He was actually charted as one of the most well-rounded cornerbacks in this draft, meaning not great at one thing, but good at everything. And that's what he brings to the table. He's also a competitor. He's very smart. He knows how to read route combination. He's good at press. He can play off man, and he's pretty good at zone. He's going to push, because I realize now in the league, you don't start 2 corners, you start 3 corners. Like, he's going to push to be a starter on it. Like, I'm very intrigued to see how this goes with him, especially with all the stuff that he brings to the table. And it didn't start just at Ole Miss. He was showing these things at Alabama when he was there too. But he knows how to get to the ball, and he's sticky in coverage. Don't get a lot of penalties. He's a clean prospect in that way. I thought he was a steal of the draft. Like, even though I feel like we got a steal later on in the draft.
All right, we'll get to later on. But of the corners that you looked at and spent time looking at before the draft, take Will Johnson and Travis Hunter out of the equation. Tell me who you really liked. I'm just curious because we didn't have this conversation before the weekend, but I want to know who the corners that you were talking about last week and the week before.
I had a man crush on Siobhan Reveal. Okay. Hey, listen, the Cowboys had a draft. Nobody wants to talk about it. But I thought the Cowboys knocked the draft out. I thought they had a A+ draft. And Reveal, what you get with him, I hate to paint this picture and put this pressure on this kid. I saw a faster Richard Sherman. I saw a Richard Sherman with a 4.3, and that's a lethal weapon to me. At 6'3", you cannot throw fades on him. Nobody could throw fades on Richard Sherman. With that wingspan, it just will not happen. But guess what? At 6'3", he has the ability to stop, start, and get out of cuts. I can always tell a great defensive back if they can pick off over routes. Like, as a defensive back, it's 3 levels of the over route. If he got a step on me, I'm trying to get the tackle. If I'm right there with him, I can break the ball up. Rarely do you go under it and pick him off. I've watched this kid do it numerous times because of his wingspan and because of his speed. I thought he was a steal. I thought he was special. I know it was red flags about him being injured, but I thought he was one of the best in this draft, and I thought he was the steal. Now, Darian Porter, another guy.
Hello. That was my guy.
Yeah, listen, he's so raw, it scares you. You know what I'm saying? Because he hasn't played but a year cornerback. But at 6'3", not a 6'3" cornerback, and I'm talking about measurables, jump off of this sheet of paper that you put them on. Now, the question is age and how long does it take him to really get comfortable at the position. I like Kobe Bryant. He didn't even get drafted. I thought he was one of the fierce competitors. Like, the one prospect that me and Logan went back and forth with, we could never really figure out what you're getting, is Jahad Barron out of
John A. Barron from Texas. Yeah.
Texas, yes. He makes plays. He's all over the field. He's very good in zone, but looks kind of stiff sometimes. Also, don't look like the most twitchiest athlete I've seen. I don't know if he's an outside corner. I think he might be a lifetime nickel. Like, I don't know what I'm getting at. So it was a couple of guys that jumped off the page to me, but it was deeper draft than people said it was at cornerback.
You know, you talk about loading up at a position. I mean, Denver took Barron, and they have a few corners. You know, they've got a guy named Pat Surtain who isn't that bad. I thought that was interesting because they really wanted a running back. But you mentioned Porter. That was the guy that I talked about because I know that he didn't get around to playing corner until this year, and I don't know why. Part of it is he was an offensive player. But I don't think there was a guy in the draft that was that tall, had those arms, the length of his arms, and ran 4.3. Like, he's a freak. Now, maybe he's super raw, but the physical part of it, and I thought just looking at him on tape this year, and I'm not an expert, you are, but he really anticipates well. Like, he just had a knack as an offensive player before.
I'm finna say he thinks like a receiver.
Yeah.
So he takes that and he plays it on defense. And same semblance of Travis Hunter. He goes about playing the position offensively. Champ played it offensively. Deion Sanders played it offensively. And that's what you get. Like, we always had this conversation in the DB room. What position did you play on offense? Now you get a guy like Sean Spring. Sean Spring played running back. So you got two type of corners. You got your cornerback that play running back, and you got your cornerback that play wide receiver. It tends to be the wide receivers tend to play the ball a tad better because they're still thinking like a wide receiver. So Porter did that on defense this year.
But I'm sure there were some corners along the way that played quarterback too at some point, right? So what were those guys like?
I'm going to say mostly the guys that played quarterback end up playing safety.
True.
For some odd reason. So they're still back barking calls. They still playing the middle of the field, and they still playing the middle of the field like a quarterback would.
All right. Jalen Lane, Virginia Tech, 4th round.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
he can go get it. When I watch him, very twitchy, can get down the field. Built well. Of course, Virginia Tech didn't throw the ball as much, so his numbers just ain't gonna blow you away. But I don't see a weakness to his game. Like, when you look at his game, do you see a weakness to his game?
No, but you know what I noticed? Because I didn't really know him before they picked him. I think his vision as a runner is better as a returner than it is as a receiver. Does that make? I don't know if that makes any sense because it shouldn't be any different. But his vision and cutback ability as a returner is outstanding.
So you feel like he sees the field totally as a returner, and he sees half the field as a yak runner.
Maybe, but he's got such great speed that there's a lot of separation too, especially in college.
Yeah, most definitely, and that's what the thing that they wanted. Like, he's the ultimate clear out, take the top off the defense guy.
Right.
Like, he's the alert guy. Like, you're going to have a couple of alerts when he comes in the game. He's going to be he go the speed guy. The other alert is Deebo Samuel. Like, taking nothing for Terry, they only going to alert Deebo Samuel because Deebo Samuel's come with trickery. Deebo Samuel's come with a question mark. Like, how are they going to try to get him the ball?
Right.
So he will, like Jalen, he will be an alert guy because of his speed from the day that he touches on the field. So that's the advantage that he's going to have, especially on this roster.
Well, they ran him on a bunch of fly sweeps and jet sweeps at Virginia Tech too, so he may be a part of that as well. All right, so I'm going to guess when you said there's a player later in the draft that you really, really, really like, because I think you said something to that effect, that it's the next guy, Kane Medrano, the linebacker from UCLA.
Oh, yes, sir. His measurables are ridiculous. The fastest linebacker in the draft. And here go the thing about it. Are they going to play him at linebacker? Are they going to play him at safety?
Right.
They have two options.
Right.
Yeah, so they're going to think of it. Like, you want to talk about a flex position guy. You want to talk about a tweener. You want to talk about an alert guy when you come in on defense. Where do you play him at? Because he can do whatever you need him to do. You know how most defensive they had this player that this special position called star?
Yeah.
Like he will be one of those. And we drafted a couple of guys last year that also can play star. All right. And so at the end of the day, I think this guy is one of those pieces, them chess pieces on the board that they're going to make offenses find where this guy is. And I can see this guy getting on the field. I can see him getting on the field faster than people that think he can get on the field because I watched the interception I pick six that he ran back, and just the athletic ability. He literally picks it off running 60 yards, jumps over a guy before he gets to the end zone. He can do whatever needs to be done. He's a great blitzer. He's good in coverage. He's a good tackler, and he brings energy. He's a commander. He's a commander. Like, if I can say this, watching his film, I just smiled the whole time, Professor. I just smiled while I was watching his film.
I said the same thing in the open to the show. That's so funny. I had a feeling you were going to like him. The athleticism's one thing, but what I noticed, and you had this, and I actually compared him not athletically. It's the wrong comparison athletically, but he has that athletic anticipation. He is like Micah Hyde has been one of my favorite players to watch for many, many years, not because he's a tremendous athlete. He makes up for the lack of athleticism because he has such great anticipation on where the quarterback's going, the spatial, awareness to play the ball. Yeah. And that's what this guy has, it's interesting because I wondered the same thing. Is he going to play linebacker? Is he going to drop in coverage? Or is he going to line up at safety or star or Buffalo nickel or whatever? Because it looks like he's got a lot of possibilities. But do you know what I'm saying? Because you had it too, like that anticipation, which is part of athleticism, but it's not a measurable thing.
No, it's a thing where you take what you study to the field. Like, the thing about it is anticipation is believing what you studied and taking it to the field and always being a step above. Athletics can only take you so far. Mentally, you're going to have to be able to beat some guys, and you mentally beat them by anticipating routes, knowing route combinations, knowing habits, knowing, such things like a pat of the football, if you know this quarterback likes to pat the ball before he throw it. Like, it just the smallest minutia, the smallest detail, whatever I can take. And he does play what I call ahead of the chain. When I say ahead of the chain, he's already making a move before the ball is snapped on where he wants to go because he's seen where you already lined up to be. So coaches love that because they know I can coach him with the smallest detail and he will figure out the rest. And that's what I say. He's a coach's delight.
Yeah. I looked this up because I've always, for whatever reason, just loved Micah Hyde, and he's never the fastest or the biggest guy by a long shot. He's got 24 career interceptions. That it's all like over the course of the year, he's just always been a guy. It's like, oh, there's another interception from a guy that doesn't run well necessarily, not big, but also had the hands, and you could see the hands with Medrano as well. All right, what about the running back? Go ahead. Did you want to say something else about Medrano?
No, I was just gonna give Micah Hyde his flowers, man. I have seen cerebral. Micah Hyde is a step faster Ryan Clark. All right, knows where to be. Johnny on the spot, studies enough. Never going for no wasted motion. Like the best defensive backs in the league don't have to be the fastest. Do they have wasted motions of not? Do they like Dion and what's his name was arguing about a T-step? It ain't about how you get there. It's about getting there, and that's what Micah Hyde does a lot. It's never air when he's around. He's always tight to wherever he needs to be, tight to the player he needs to be, and always Johnny on the spot. So, back to the running back.
Well, hold on. One other thing, because I wanted to mention this guy, too, because, as I'm sitting here, we're talking about Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde is a safety. He's never played linebacker. But the other guy that I brought up, not that, they're exactly the same in a lot of ways, but the dude Van Ginkel over the last few years in Miami and then last year in Minnesota, I kind of see Medrano being that kind. Now, Van Ginkel is a freak too, and a relentless pass rusher. But the way he seems to time quick throws, how many of those has he picked off in the last few years? He picked one off here from Sam Howell, and returned it for a touchdown. And I think
I won up you one. How about Milano?
Milano same thing.
From the Bills.
Milano same thing. Yeah. But Van Ginkel is also really like he's tall and long. Like is Medrano that tall? He might be.
No, he's more of a build of a Miles Jack. Think about Miles.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's more of a build of a Miles Jack.
All right. The last pick, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, his nickname's Bill, the running back who only played one game at Arizona, but played at New Mexico and Alabama State before that. What did you see in him?
Real rounded. Like he is. I see what the coaches and the GMs like in players. They don't like. If they get a one-dimensional player, they want you to be great at it. They'll rather have guys that's good at everything. This guy can pass block. This guy can run between the tackles. This guy can break a deep one. This guy can catch out the back. So they want guys. They want football players, and this guy is epitome. He's a football player. Like he's one of these dudes. You gonna ask me what sticks out, Smoot? Nothing. All right? He just does everything the right way, and that's what you want from a player. Now, he's going into a room that most people don't see as a deep room. I look at that room as a hard room to get reps in. So can he get some reps? We'll see when the pass come on. But I like him because he does everything, especially in this deep running back draft. Like, if I was never going to reach for a running back in a draft, this was the draft that I was not going to reach for a running back. And by the way, the show that this team, this organization are doing things just effortless the right way.
Yep.
They did bring in Gabe Taylor, Sean Taylor's young brother.
Right.
He is coming in for camp. That's classy if I haven't seen anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, Fred the Hound Smoot giving us his best stuff on this Monday following the draft. Love it. Thank you so much. As always, I'll talk to you soon.
Anytime, Professor.
That was Smoot from my podcast on Monday. All right. There was big news with a local team yesterday. I will tell you what that was when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, yesterday, the Nats lose on a wild pitch after taking the lead in the ninth. Bryson Stott came home to score on the steal. Nats lose 7-6. They'll continue their series tonight. Pregame at 6:15 right here on the Team 980. The NFL fined the Falcons $250,000 and defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich for $100,000 for failing to prevent the disclosure of confidential information distributed to the club in advance of the NFL draft. As we know, Jax Ulbrich made the prank call to Shadur Sanders on, I believe it was Friday night. WNBA, Georgia Amore, the Mystics number 6 overall pick, injured her right ACL during Tuesday's practice. The team announced she and the team will examine treatment and rehabilitation options. Again, she was the number 6 pick in the WNBA draft. The Washington Capitals look to close out their series against the Montreal Canadiens. Alex Ovechkin was not on the ice yesterday, but was on the ice this morning for morning skate. Logan Thompson was the first off the ice. He will get the start, and Alexei Protas will likely draw in for Taylor Radish. Pregame at 6:45 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
Alexi Protas officially a game-time decision after being a full go the last few days in skate-arounds. That, according to Spencer Carberry. So we'll find out tonight before the game begins. Caps try to finish off Montreal tonight at home in Game 5. Meantime, yesterday, Maryland basketball signed Darius Adams, the number 25 player in the 2025 class. He's the highest rated Maryland basketball commit of the internet rankings era, behind Diamond Stone, Jalen Stick-Smith, and Derek Queen. The highest rated guard recruit of the internet rankings era. That means in the last 25 years. He's a 6'5" guard, played at La Luminaire in Indiana this past season, grew up in Manasquan, New Jersey. That's where my in-laws live. Wonderful place. Darius Adams commits to Maryland. Huge haul of new players for head coach Buzz Williams. Really good start. All right, that's it for the day. Back tomorrow. Chris Russell's up next.